Whenever a movie or a TV show takes a crack at racing, things usually get sacrificed. In some instances, the movie or TV show sacrifice a good story to showcase racing or mainly wrecks like Talladega Nights, while other movies or TV shows focus more on the story, which is good to help flesh out the characters, but then the racing isn't nearly as good as it could be. It's very rare to get a story that encompasses both a good solid story with racing, which Days of Thunder barely managed to do. But which route did the cart before the ponies take? Well, let's get the engines fired up on this episode and find out. Well, I can say that the writers for once made me enjoy Snips and Snails. Normally their stupidity and grating voices nearly give me a permanent eye twitch, but here they were used sparingly right at the beginning of the episode, and then once the focus of the episode shifts to Applebloom, Scootaloo, and Sweetie Belle, we don't get another Snips or Snails line for the rest of the episode. They do appear at the end in the race, but they never get to say anything again. I do also want to say that when Cheerilee was presenting the ribbons for fastest cart, most creative cart, and most traditional cart, I expected the Crusaders to have the desire to win the most obvious ribbons, mainly because of who their sisters are. I was really expecting something like Scootaloo saying, "With Rainbow Dash on my team, we'll win the fastest for sure," but I was pleasantly surprised to see the Crusaders interested in winning ribbons for different criteria than what we would have thought. Now, as for when Rainbow Dash, Applejack, and Rarity entered the picture to help their little sisters, I did love Rarity's story to Sweetie Belle about how and who she lost most creative design to as a filly. Her overreaction coupled with the fact that it was Derpy of all ponies who beat her was both funny, and we got to see a filly Derpy, so it was cute. However, I was a little disappointed that the writers went the help or completely takes over the project route. It makes sense that Rainbow, AJ, and Rarity sought after winning ribbons that matched their personalities, but I was pretty much expecting this plot right after the Crusaders gushed over the thought of winning the ribbons that they wanted to win. Although I do have to give credit to the writers that they did a pretty good job in the progression of how much the older sisters would take over. It goes from Scootaloo not worrying about anything to Applebloom on the fence of upholding Apple family tradition while wanting to win the race, to Sweetie Belle having to correct Rarity that the cart was Sweetie Belle's, and then all three of the Crusaders feel like something's wrong the next morning. And yet, I did not like how Rarity and AJ practically told Sweetie Belle and Applebloom what they wanted on the cart. After all the things that AJ and Applebloom and Rarity and Sweetie Belle have been through, I found it a little unnerving how AJ held their family's heritage over Applebloom's head and how Rarity basically laughed at Sweetie Belle's ideas. Honestly, I found Scootaloo and Rainbow's disagreements the best part of the cart building scenes, mainly because she was the least vocal of the Crusaders and just tried to add the Phoenix additions to the cart. I found it much more enjoyable when the song came on and the older sisters just nonchalantly took their sisters' ideas off the carts. While the episode focuses more on the building of the carts, which I honestly didn't mind this time around, the thrill of waiting to finally see the race was built up pretty nicely, especially with how disappointing some of the cart building scenes were. Once Cheerilee announced that it was time to begin the race, I was ready to see some intense racing action. Yet, I can't help but say that the writers got Applejack and Rarity's feelings towards the race backwards. Why would Applejack not care about at least trying to win the race? It's possible to have a traditional cart yet still win. You could drive a classic 65 Mustang and still try to win a race. And as for Rarity, wouldn't she be more worried about getting the cart dirty or banged up on the track? It is a dirt track after all. It would have made much more sense if Applejack had the desire to win and Rarity just wanted to show off the cart design by driving slower than the other racers. But besides all that, I couldn't get enough of the race, and the song I didn't really like at first, but upon viewing the race again I found it to be pretty catchy, even if Rainbow, AJ, and Rarity were pretty egotistical about it. And I loved Cheerilee's enthusiasm as a cheerleader for her students, and it was nice to see her try to get Rainbow, AJ, and Rarity to let the younger ones have the spotlight for the race. And it was so funny how all three of the Crusaders screamed as they rode down the hill, except for Applebloom, who screamed because the cart was going too slow. However, my biggest complaint of the whole episode has to be the track itself. I thought it was nice that they turned all of Ponyville into their racetrack, but why was it designed like a demolition derby track? I get that they didn't want to race on an oval like NASCAR does most of the time, but racing on a double figure 8 track? Why would anyone be surprised that there was a massive pileup? Who thought a double figure 8 racetrack was a good idea? Even looking at the track, I can't find a way to make it better. Maybe if they took out the huge intersection of the track and made it a continuous multi-turn oval, then the risk of a head-on collision would be reduced. But as we know, the crash happens, and I honestly loved how riled up and pissed the Crusaders were. Seriously, this is how angry Twilight should have been in Look Before You Sleep. The older sisters needed to realize how bad their help had ruined everyone's day and not just their little sister's day. And you know what? The ending of the episode was actually pretty good. Not only did the Crusaders finally get their point across in a manner that their older sisters deserved, but Rainbow, AJ, and Rarity also pointed out that the Crusaders didn't protest too hard against their help. It's completely understandable what crossroads the Crusaders were facing. When you have the help of someone who is experienced, you really don't want to try and question them too much. And it's really hard and somewhat intimidating to speak out against an adult or someone who's older than you. The Crusaders may have matured since the show started, but they're still kids. And the best part of the scene though is what both Rarity and Rainbow Dash said. Just because someone is older than you, it doesn't automatically mean they're an expert on everything, and how the older sisters could have done a better job at listening was true too. I did find it funny though how Applebloom pointed out how their sisters owed every other racer an apology and not just them, especially Rainbow's nervous chuckle to an angry Cheerilee. And it was so rewarding to see the Crusaders racing on their own at the end while their sisters became their fans on the sidelines for the race. For someone who's usually a competitor and not a spectator, Rainbow's got a pretty nice cheer. Okay, so this episode definitely had some moments that I was not happy with. Rarity and Applejack seemed just a little too high and mighty to their sisters for my liking, but thankfully those moments were brief and a montage sweeps them under the rug. And the design of the racetrack just left me shaking my head. Whichever pony in Ponyville thought that a double figure 8 racetrack was a good idea, well, I'd say get someone new next year. And despite the plot being one that's been done plenty of times before, I'd much prefer one like this than if the race turned the Crusaders against each other, or if it were the class trying to beat the rich kids trope like Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon. And Rarity and Applejack should have been swat for how they felt about the race. However, the lessons learned for both sides were good, the racing and the song that accompanied the race was solid, and I really appreciate how the writers managed to show that the Crusaders aren't carbon copies of their sisters. If only some fanfiction writers remembered that. The only things that could use some tweaking are the kart building scenes. I just feel that Rarity shouldn't laugh at her little sister's ideas and Applejack shouldn't guilt Applebloom with her family's heritage. Maybe if Applebloom talked to Rainbow Dash, Sweetie Belle talked to AJ, and Scootaloo talked to Rarity about how the others felt and we skipped what AJ and Rarity did, the kart building scene would have been just fine. Maybe. Though I think the addition of possibly Jeff Gordon, Tony Stewart, or Kurt Busch as a legendary racing pony standing in as the flag pony or something would have made the episode a bit more authentic to racing. All in all, I have to give the Cart Before the Ponies a yellow flag rating. There's just a few too many issues with the episode that would understandably turn some people away, but there's still a few really good things that lessen the blows a bit. But how did you like the episode? Was it like the sweet taste of champagne in Victory Lane, a headache-inducing blown tire into the wall, or was it a harmless top 5 run that was hard fought after a bad pit stop? Tell me what you thought in the comments below. I'm Mr. Left Turn, I'll see you after I get back from Watkins Glen.